Good afternoon, Genesis Project family.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey, we're so happy to be here together in Grenada together and to share a special story that I got to experience this testimony when I was in Memphis, Tennessee.
Right. This is a testimony, as Cliff was saying, about a gentleman who is a police officer, and this is what we will. I was kind of hyping you all up about on Facebook, because it is not only that we are doing things. We want you all to be reminded that there are many men and women who are living their everyday life but still serving God, doing what needs to be done for the furtherance of the kingdom, okay? And for us not to get distracted about only the negative things that we see on the news, because no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're experiencing, once you hold on to God, we know and we believe that everything in the end will work things out for God's good.
For His good, yes, absolutely. So we're going to share the testimony of Officer Sean Houle. He is now retired. He was a longtime police officer, I believe about 10 years, maybe even more, in the Kernersville Police Department in North Carolina. So I was very, very blessed to be able to serve with Sean. Sean was a chaplain, a Billy Graham's chaplain on the rapid response team from out of North Carolina that came and served in Memphis with us. And he and his partner Alan drove around right behind us, usually showed up on all the of our job sites, and were able to minister to so many people, and even police officers there in Memphis for the second week that I was there.
Yeah, so he had really experienced some devastating, life-changing experience. I don't want to steal the thunder of the testimony, so watch the testimony, and I hope that it touched you, I hope that it moved you, I hope that it makes you become on fire for Christ. All right.
Amen.
And be reminded that no matter what you're going through, that hold on to God. Amen. Just like Officer Houle did.
Yes.
And so many others. Enjoy.
So I'll get to the main event, and this is the big testimony. But so February 21st of last year, I'm still doing that work that I was talking about, but now I got a dog, and I had him at this time for about, I don't know, I guess we've been together somewhere between 2 and 3 years. More like 3 years maybe, but anyway, his name is Jax. He's amazing. He's a 4-year-old Belgian Mal. I'm biased, but he's the best dog in the police department. I don't care what anybody says. Incredible dog. We were doing that work one night. I see a vehicle go by. If I was sitting in an interdiction school right now, and they had a screen up behind me of like, okay, so when a car goes by you and you're like wanting to interdict this car, this is what you look for. Every single person in this vehicle did every single thing you would see in that video. It was like, it was literally like a God like just lit up a light right on top of their car when they went by me and was like, here you go. And it was amazing. And those are rare, and you love to see those as a cop. So I ended up following it and getting a reason to stop it, and so I stop it, and the passenger jumps out and runs. Well, I had 3 other people in the car I had to deal with. I didn't want to, and I knew one of them had a warrant, so I didn't want to let the car go, so I stayed with the car, and I let him run off into the woods. People running and jumping and running from cars is not an uncommon thing. It was pretty frequent, and so, you know, you get on the radio, call for backup, let everybody know the area you're in, and hope he beds down and you find him. I deal with the car. Everybody in the car goes to jail. He gets away for that time being. I take the driver to the jail for his stuff. He was respectful. Nobody else was. Very respectful, polite, didn't give me a hard time, tried to help me. Honestly, tried to help me. And so, you know, if somebody's that way with me, and I think this is, well, it's not that I think, I know, with all cops, if that's how you are with them, they give that back to you. That's just, we're people, not robots. We're not monsters. It's give respect to get respect, and that's kind of the way we operate. So that being said, his warrants were not for anything severe. He was released from the jail that night. He lived in Kernersville, and I had to go back to Kernersville. So I said, all right, you were this way with me. I'm going to give this back to you. I'll give you a ride back to your apartment. Do you want it? He said, yes, please. So I gave him a ride back to his apartment. So I pull into the apartment, and my headlights, I didn't have any backup with me. I was just dropping this guy off. There was no reason to. So my bright lights shine across a car in the parking lot as I'm turning in. And as soon as, immediately, because it was about, at that time, it was about 3 in the morning. So for somebody to be sitting in their car at 3 in the morning, maybe, but, really no good reason probably for them to be doing that. So I see the person, but it's immediately when I see the person, I know, okay, that's the person that ran from my traffic stop earlier. So I parked the car. The guy is still in my back seat in the prisoner area waiting to be let out. I go up to contact the guy in this car. It wasn't his car. He broke into it. So he's sitting in the driver's seat, and I start giving him commands. I can't see his hands. I draw out my weapon. I just have it down at my waist, and I'm just pointing it at the ground just in case he does come up with a weapon. So giving him commands, he doesn't follow my commands, and then he dives over toward the other side of the car for really no apparent reason, and all of a sudden, really, it was kind of unprompted other than the fact that I was giving him commands. But so I opened up the door and I grabbed him because, control is everything. If you control his movements, you can at least hopefully somewhat control what he goes to do. That's the hope anyway. And so I grabbed him, and his momentum plus me grabbing him, it pulled me into the car. And so now I've got a problem. I'm in this confined space of a car with this guy with my gun out still, and we're fighting, throwing punches. I don't know, there's body parts and stuff flying everywhere, and it's dark. So somehow or another, I don't really know how, but the passenger side door opens. I know I didn't open it, and maybe he did. I don't know. Somehow the door opens. We end up going out the door, and I came out during the time we were in the car. I ended up putting him in a headlock, and I had him against my outer carrier vest, and I had him tight. But when we came out of the car, I came out on my back, and he came out on top of me. And I've got my gun in this hand, and I can't get on the radio yet. And I managed to somehow get this hand over to my radio, and I started yelling for help on the radio. Give me units, code 1, I'm in a fight with one, blah, blah, blah. I'm yelling my location. They're asking me to repeat all this good, all the stuff you want to hear when you're in a fight. And, so I give it to them very clearly, and that's the last time I can get on the radio. I can't, at that point, it got so intense, and with the gun out, I couldn't safely get back on my radio again at that point. So I went radio silent, and I could hear all the sirens. I knew they were coming. I could hear everybody on the radio, I'm en route, and I could hear all the sirens way off in the distance, and only a cop would understand this part of it. When you're a cop and you're in that situation, when you hear the first siren, it sounds like they're coming from Florida. Like it's you hear them forever. It's who was it? Sarah, you were talking about the other day when you were out with that lady, and it felt like forever. The response, but that's what it's like. It's that feeling. So I wrap my legs around his body and I cross my ankles, and I'm just intending at this point, knowing that people are coming, to just kind of control him and hold him in the position I'm in until they get there to me. But what he starts doing is he's still got leverage from the ground, so I just had his upper body and his head and everything in my control. So he starts lifting me up off of the ground and getting me pretty high up off the ground, and then he would slam me back down into the ground on my back, and he just kept doing it over and over and over again. Well, at one point I wanted to reholster. I didn't want to have to worry about this anymore, and I wanted to have both my hands free to land some better punches. And so I tried to reholster at one point, and it wouldn't go in. We have double retention on our holsters, and my hood was up, so the gun wouldn't go back in. I didn't know that, and I'm not going to think about that in that moment. So anyway, it wouldn't go in, So I try again, but he gets me much higher off the ground. He kept me the highest off the ground that he had this whole time at this point. And he slams me. He slams me hard. But my hand, when he did this time, and this all happens kind of simultaneously. So I'm going to say several different things, but it was all happening kind of at the same time. About that same time, I'm also starting to lose control of his head, and I can feel it slipping. And then he kind of, at the same time that he slams me back down, and my hand hits the ground with the gun in it, his head comes completely free, and now his whole upper body's free. And then the gun, the worst part is the gun comes, when it hits, comes out of my hand, and I hear it hit the asphalt and bounce away from me. I can see it. I'm on my side at this point now, but I can't get to it. I still have him with my legs, but they got a little bit looser, and I'd kind of fallen to the side. So he hears it immediately hit the ground, and then he dives out of my legs for the gun. So I'm laying on my side, and I see his hand go on top of the gun, and he spins it, still laying on the asphalt. And as soon as he spins it, he lined it up absolutely perfect with my face. And so I'm staring down the barrel of it, and he immediately pulls the trigger. And I saw the muzzle flash. I heard the bang of it go off, and then I just felt like I got rocked by the Hulk in my face right here. And then everything basically here kind of goes numb, really. I knew I was hit in the face. Didn't know exactly where, but I knew I was hit in the face. I could see out of my lower vision, I could kind of see all the blood and bone pieces coming out of my face. And I kind of closed my eyes in that moment. And what I'm thinking in that moment is I really thought I thought if I hadn't died already that I was fixing to die. I just knew being shot in the face, minimal chance of survival is what I believed. So I closed my eyes and believed when I opened them back up I'd be in heaven. That was my thought. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Ellie and my two kids. And when I say I saw, they looked as real to me as I'm looking at all of you guys right now. I literally felt like I could touch them, like I wanted to. That's how real they looked to me. And when that happened, it was like the switch flipped in my head. Not that I didn't have a will to live before, but it was like just a switch flipped in my head. And I opened my eyes back up, and I realized, okay, I'm still laying on the ground in the same spot, laying next to this car. I'm alive. But then I didn't see him right away. So I start kind of looking around, still laying on the ground, kind of looking around me to see where he's at. And I kind of see him off a little bit behind me. And he's in the process of getting back up to his feet. And as he's getting back up to his feet, he's raising the gun up too and pointing it toward my head. So in a moment that I can only describe to you as just purely supernatural, it felt like I had been lifted up off the ground, because I distinctly remember getting up off the ground like I hadn't even been shot at all. And I remember popping up and spinning. And the other thing that was crazy too is I know I saw the gun coming up to my head, but my hand when I spun went exactly to where the gun was. There was no searching for it. I didn't even have to really look for it necessarily. I spun and I felt the metal of it touch my hand. And as soon as I did, I closed. And my momentum was already spinning me anyway, so I kept kind of going with it, which moved it away from my head. And I continued to just move it as far as I could away from my head. He pulled the trigger again at that moment, and that went through the center of my hand and out the back. I didn't have anything left in me at that point. That supernatural came when I needed it, but was gone pretty quickly. And so I fell back to the ground. And I remember when I hit the ground again, I just got back on the radio and just said, "Help, I'm dying." And, they had set off the emergency alerts on my radio. So the only person who could get out was me. And I could hear it toning. And then I just laid there after I said, "Help, I'm dying." And I remember seeing flashing lights, so I knew people were pulling up. they didn't know if I was a suspect or if I was me when they first showed up. Two of them were so close they heard the gunshots, but thought that I had shot him and just didn't know where I was. So they all drew down on me, thinking I was a suspect and giving me commands. And then one of them, who had a better position, saw the police canine on the back of my vest. And they realized it was me, and so that they ran up to me, and I just remember hearing them yelling to me, "Sean, you're going to be okay. Stay with me. Just keep your eyes open. Stay awake." And I remember my buddy Corey in particular. He stood where his ankles and his feet were like right next to my head, my face. And I remember grabbing onto his ankles and just saying, "Corey, please don't let me die." And then I could feel him ripping everything off of me, my vest and my holster, and I remember I think one of them started cutting on my clothes and everything. I remember all that stuff happening. And after a little bit longer of laying there, I started to have a lot of trouble breathing. And the best way I know how to explain it is if you've ever, when you've held your breath underwater and then you come up out of the water and you take that first breath, that was my breathing for that point on until I got to the hospital and they sedated me. I remember I just kept going, trying to catch breath, and I couldn't catch breaths for nothing. That was all the breath I could get, was doing that gasping constantly just to try to breathe. And I never did lose consciousness at all the entire time. And I remember on the way to the hospital, they strapped me to the stretcher and put me in the back of the ambulance. And I felt like they were putting me in a coffin because I couldn't move and I wanted to move. But if I was moving, I felt like I was alive. So I distinctly remember kicking, and everybody in the ambulance was people I knew because I'd worked for EMS 2.5 years before I was a cop. So everybody that was there for EMS knew me personally, which was really hard for them. And I remember kicking and punching, and I managed to get my upper body loose, and I fell halfway out of the stretcher, basically into Corey's lap. And while I'm still begging him to not let me die, after the fact, I remember multiple times apologizing to him, like way after the fact, not like this was way after the fact. I was like, "Corey, I'm so sorry," because I just remember getting blood all over his. Like, I remember how much blood I got all over his pants and uniform and everything. I was like, "Corey, I'm sorry, getting all the blood all over your pants." But so I fell halfway out of the stretcher, and I continued to have that trouble breathing. But I distinctly remember thinking to myself, I had two boys. At the time, my youngest was 9 months, and my other one was 4. And I remember thinking to myself, my 4-year-old, we were able to develop a relationship and do things together, make memories together in his short time here. But my 9-month-old, I did not. And I remember thinking to myself, why is this happening right now? I've read these stories, I've seen these stories, and now I'm about to be one of these stories. My 9-month-old kid is going to grow up not even have any idea who his dad is, except for by people showing him pictures and telling him stories. And that hurt way worse than any gunshot, I can promise you that. But I will say this, I honestly believed I was going to die that night. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You ask me today, you ask me 20 years from now, I'll tell you that night I believed I was going to die. But I did know that I would be going to heaven. And there was a peace and comfort in that. If I'm being honest about it, did it make leaving my wife and kids behind easier? No, it didn't in that moment. But I did have some comfort knowing that I would see them again, knowing that I was about to go to heaven, and that was okay with me going there. They didn't want to at that time, but I knew I was going there. And EMS that night is never in Kernersville. It doesn't happen. They're way too short, and they're never there. They're always in some other part of the county. That night, at 3:30 in the morning of all times, they happened to be 4.5 minutes up the street. Having just returned back to Kernersville from handling a call in Clemens, which was on the complete opposite side of the county. God put them 4.5 minutes up the street, period. Because on any other night, at any other time, they're not there. They get me to the hospital in under 11.5 minutes. And then you guys know about our area. From where I was in Kernersville, that's wishful thinking, and they got me there in under 11 and a half minutes. That doesn't happen either. When they got me to the hospital, the first bullet had severed my carotid artery up here, just under my ear. And they could not get the bleeding stopped, and they had not, according to the doctors after the fact, really ever seen an injury like that. And so there was a lot of debate and question about how to go about surgically helping me in that moment. So the doctors, there was two staff trauma surgeons that night in the ED, and one of them was about 6'6" and had been a doctor for a very long time. He made the decision, I can't do a surgery on him in the operating room without him bleeding out before it's accomplished. It's pointless, he'll die. So he decided, I've got to figure out something else. So he could do this. There again, if he's not on staff this night in the hospital, it's a different story. There's a lot of things about this that if they don't happen, I'm not sitting here right now. He decides to stick his fingers up through the bullet hole, which is a .45 caliber, so it was a pretty large hole. He stuck his fingers up through there, and he found the severed part of my artery up here, and he pinched it off and held it for 45 minutes. And during that 45 minutes, they determined they were going to try something that they had never tried before. They didn't know if it would. They do interventional radiology all the time, but they had never used it in that application before, so they didn't know if it'd work. They called the interventional radiologist, told him what they had, and asked if there was anything he could do. And his response, and I know this only because I talked to him after the facts, I went back and thanked all these doctors. He said his response to them was, I don't know, but just keep them alive until I get there. So he shows up, and he ends up doing the procedure, going up through my groin or pelvis, whatever this area, and then putting pools and stents in up through my arteries, and that's how they got it to stop. During that time period, I bled out over 3.5 times. They had to give me 70 units of blood. And to put that in perspective, us sitting here right now have about 10 in us. That's the average person. And so they had to give me 7 times what we have sitting here right now. So I'm also very passionate now about blood drives.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. They get the bleeding stopped, and then they end up getting me to a different area of the hospital to continue to try to stabilize me. So the plastic surgeon on staff, and these are all people, there's not people on call, these are people literally on staff at the hospital. So they have to be there this day. It's not like they got called in. They have to be there this day. The plastic surgeon who was on staff that night happened to be a plastic surgeon that specialized in face and neck. That's not a coincidence. Not only that, he is an incredible doctor, Dr. Runyon, and he, I don't know if you guys remember hearing about a firefighter who had his face burned off, and they did a full face transplant on him in this country. It was the first one ever done. My plastic surgeon was on the team that did that surgery to that guy. So these are the people I have caring for me that night. So if you don't think God puts people in your path, something's... please just talk to me. It's very apparent God puts people in your path. I don't know any way to say it. It's facts. So during that, I also had a stroke because I didn't have blood flow going to my brain for a long period of time, and I lost so much blood, I ended up having a pretty large stroke in this side of my brain over here, which damaged and affected all of my cognitive stuff, which ultimately leads to my medical retirement. But anyway, 3 days later, I wake up to Ellie sitting next to my bed, and it was best way I know how to describe that to you. It was almost as if God and I high-fived. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, but I could open my eyes and see what I saw. And it was like we high-fived. It was like, okay, you're gonna live, you're alive, you made it. Good job. You used the strength I gave you, and you made it. And so my mouth and jaw was wired shut. I was intubated still at the time. They ended up, there's pictures of me in the state, but they ended up having to tie my wrist and stuff to the bed because every time they'd lighten my sedation, I'd go to try to rip everything out of my mouth and all the tubes they had in me and everything. Anyway, make a long story short about the recovery. I had to relearn to walk. I couldn't see anything on my left side and I had a great deal of difficulty really doing anything on my left side, but walking was a big problem. I had to relearn to walk. I was on a liquid diet from, this happened on February 21st, and I didn't get my mouth and jaw unwired until almost June. So I went from 180 pounds healthy, or I think relatively healthy, to 158 pounds and looking very, feeling and looking pretty terrible. But my wife is a nurse, so they, after being in the hospital for, I guess it was like a month and a half or something like that, maybe, roundabout, I was in the hospital, bouncing between ICU, step-down ICU and other units, and then finishing up in rehab. They decided to allow me to go home a bit early from the hospital because my wife was a nurse. So my wife now is charged with my care, and that involves packing and unpacking all of my holes, tending to all the stitches and staples all over me. Oh, and I skipped one big part too. Sorry, let me real quick. Dr. Chang is a vascular surgeon. My carotid artery, like I said, was severed. He did a surgery where I've got an incision from like here to here, and he took a vein out of my leg. He tied it from one side of my artery to the other, and did some other smart doctor things, and somehow built me a new artery. So now I have a new artery, complements of a vein in my leg. Thank you. We were talking about this last night, about this. I have a big, huge scar right here now. I thought about it last night after I had a conversation with somebody, and I'm pretty sure that was going to be used as a skin graft, but they didn't end up using it, so they cut it and folded it up, but then they just stapled it back down. So now I have this like really giant scar all right here that it looks like I got bit by a shark or something, really. So like when I go to the beach now, like I get these looks, you know, like what, this dude just got attacked by a shark or something like that. And so I go with that. Yeah, I did. It was wild. You know, recovery was exhaustive. The liquid diet, if you ever want to lose weight, great way to do it, but my goodness, the worst. I very much have a new appreciation for food and eating. My wife was incredible. Without my wife, and this goes back to the cancer and what God did in the beginning, our marriage was so firmed up from the start that God knew what I was going to need on down the road and what else we were going to encounter. He firmed us up for a reason, to last and endure through all these things that we've been through. And I thank him for that every day. My wife is incredible, and she puts up with me, and that's a lot, because I put her through a lot. But you know, our kids are doing great. My oldest had nightmares for a while. It's weird. I didn't think about addressing like death and things with my kids at a young age. I knew I'd have to address a lot of questions with them as they started to get older. But at 5, you know, he'd wake up in the middle of the night crying and saying, I don't want to die yet. I don't want to go to heaven yet, he'd say. And so now, you know, now I'm having to have these talks with my 5-year-old, and that's, that threw me for a parental loop. Quick. But how I ended up in this ministry is the Billy Graham Association has this thing called Operation Heal Our Patriots. And it originally started for veterans, and they've been doing it for a really long time for veterans, rightly so. They realized last year, conveniently, that there was a need for law enforcement. And I say conveniently, we all know what we can chalk that up to too. Setting where you guys just know. So I was applied. I'd been applied for it, and I was laid up on the couch one day, still in pretty rough shape then. And my wife came in crying and said, "You won't believe what just happened." And I said, "What?" And she said, "We just got a phone call from the Billy Graham Association. We're going to Alaska." I said, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah. So we got selected to be one of the 10 couples to go with Operation Heal Our Patriots to Alaska. And it's a spiritual, mental, and emotional healing and marital healing and counseling, should you need it, which I think really we all need it to an extent. You go to a place where literally you're cut off from the world. There's no service except for staff, and you're in the most beautiful creation. It literally looks like God just got through painting everything right in front of you, like literally an hour before you saw it. It's amazing. And all the staff and the volunteers that were up there were incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And one of the things, we walked into the cabin that we were staying in, there's no TV in it. You know, you're used to seeing when you go to a hotel or whatever cabin somewhere, you're used to seeing a TV somewhere. So while we walked in, and my wife, she looks around, beautiful. She looks at me and she says, "There's no TV." I said, "Yeah, I know." She said, "I guess we're going to have to talk to each other." I know. It's marital counseling. But it was amazing, man. We met so many amazing people through that trip. There was 9 other law enforcement couples there. We got to fellowship with each other. So that's how I got introduced to the broad range of ministry that this ministry has. Started asking questions, and then got turned on to the rapid response team. And then I told my wife right then and there, I'm signing up for this. I don't know if I get picked, but I'm going to sign up for it. And this is where God's leading me in. And then the application was approved and accepted, and this is my first deployment. So it has been a journey, and I don't know if I'm leaving anything out. I've talked a lot. There's probably people tired of hearing me. So, and I don't blame you. And there's a lot better entertainment coming up. So I hope she's ready. Yes, she's there. Awesome. Good. Get your fingers ready to go. Your voice ready to go. But no, this is God. If there's any doubt as to whether God has a plan and sets things up in His time and perfectly according to His plan, then I hope that my story or testimony has opened your eyes a little bit to what He does. My belief is that God ordained that night. I was always going to get shot. I don't really believe that there was necessarily anything I could do about it. This was God's plan. And far better than my own, which was to retire 30 years in law enforcement, which, great, awesome, but I would have never had the opportunity to do any of this stuff and be able to hopefully reach people with this testimony. And so I'm thankful for it, and I'm thankful for all y'all. And we serve a big God, and we serve a God that, like I said, has a plan far better than ours. And I think that God does not punish us, I believe. I think people so often think of something they go through as a punishment. I guess maybe it could be. I don't know. I'm not God. I don't know how I can't understand His ways. But my belief is I believe God allows things to happen to us. And I think that some things maybe in some ways can be wake-up calls. I think He tries to grab our attention, and He probably tries to do it in a lot gentler ways sometimes. And maybe we don't heed those gentler warnings or ways to grab our attention. I believe God allowed this to happen for a much greater purpose than for His honor and glory. And if one person can be led to the cross, I've said it before, if one person can be led to the cross with the aid of this testimony, then that right there makes every single bit of this absolutely 100% worth it. And God gave me a peace and a comfort early on. I do not hate the man who shot me. I don't I'm not angry. It is what it is. God used him to fulfill a greater purpose for my life. And yes, no doubt he was evil, but I think it's safe to say who won in this scenario.
Amen.
So thank you guys for listening to my testimony. I hope it was a blessing. I love you guys, and looking forward to continuing to serve with y'all.